It's about time we talked about Creem, America's only rock and roll magazine. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I am proud to say that I am from Detroit. Yes, I may live on the West Coast, but I am from Detroit. And being from Detroit, if you're from Detroit, you know all the cool stuff in Detroit. And Creem magazine was birthed in Detroit. I think it was a rough birth for sure. And there is now a documentary about this magazine, and you have to see it. It's Creem, America's only rock and roll magazine. We have the director, Scott Crawford, here, also producer JJ Kramer joining us on. How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for joining us on the Film Threat Podcast.
Going great. Thanks for having us.
I'm so ecstatic to have you both here to talk about this doc. It's amazing the footage that you were able to dig up, the interviews you were able to get, not just with people from the magazine, but rock legends. What led to pulling this whole project together? I'm just going to assume that you read Creem when, you read Creem. You had to have known about it.
Yeah, so JJ is of course the son of the late publisher, but I approached JJ, God, I don't know, what has it been, 5 years, JJ? 4 years, something like that, yeah, about doing telling this story, because it's something that, I've been thinking about for, I don't know, so many years, because I used to read it when I was a kid, and really informed kind of my career choices and things like that. So I knew it was a great story and needed to be told. And I just reached out to JJ, and we hit it off, and I think we agreed pretty quickly on the narrative that we wanted to tell, and it was just like full steam ahead after that.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on what Scott said, I had been approached a number of times over the years about various Creem projects, including documentaries, and never totally vibed with the director on the story that they wanted to tell. But both Scott and I are fortunate enough to be connected to Jan Uhelski, who's also a producer on this and one of the original Creamsters. And she's the one who actually connected Scott and I to begin with. She had known both of us for a number of years and said, hey, I think you guys, might have something here. And, to her credit, as soon as she did connect us, that first phone call that Scott and I had, we immediately sort of bonded over the story that we wanted to tell. And about it, and sort of the story, not only being about the magazine, but really about the people behind it. So that's when, that's back in 2016. And as Scott said, we were off and running after that.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, JJ, that you're, obviously you're a part of the story, and it's, not just a producer, but I mean, there are some of the most heart-wrenching parts of the film, involve you talking about your father. I'll even have to say, just as having grown up in Detroit, Creem magazine was an inspiration for me starting Film Threat magazine, which came, it's amazing to me. I don't think a lot of people know that, like, Detroit is like not just this, it's like a big music town, it's a big movie town, but it's also a big magazine town. It's inspired so many, Creem, there was, Fun magazine and Orbit, with that, like, it's such a vibrant music scene. But what I loved about Creem magazine was that it had this sense of humor it was a sense of humor, unafraid, no bullshit. I mean, how could I not be inspired by that? So I just want to thank you for that. And also, clearly, JD, this is like, coming from your perspective, very personal, so to be able to vibe with Scott on putting this together, you must have had a massive amount of, material and footage and recordings and photos. How did you just put that archive together into what resulted in the film?
I think, it all really started with that initial trust that we established amongst each other. Scott, Jan, and I had a talk at the very beginning of filming and saying, okay, what's the story we want to tell? We can tell the polished revisionist history version of the story, or we can tell the warts and all story. And you know, a lot of that was being driven by Jan and Scott wanting to be a little bit protective of me. And we all came to the conclusion that, like, I'm going to wear my big boy pants, and I signed up for this, and it's got to be the real, the raw story of Creem. And so once we kind of aligned on that, I went to work basically going into the basement of my mom's house in Commerce, and starting to just look through unlabeled boxes. And I know that sounds like cliche, but that's actually how a lot of the archival footage was discovered. We had some that a local PBS station had filmed at Creem headquarters. And you see that in the film. It's like giving a tour of the cast corridor offices and all that stuff. And that was great. But once I went into my treasure hunt mode, I was able to find archival footage of my father and I in my mom's basement, and as well as some never before seen footage of Lester Bangs and some of the other Creem staffers in the Creem offices. And it was literally in an unmarked box on an unmarked videotape. That it wasn't even a VHS or a beta tape. It was one of like those massive, I don't even know what it's called, but it was something that clearly you could not find a machine to play it in this day and age. So I had to take it to a local store and have it digitized. And lo and behold, it was like this incredible treasure trove.
Yeah, it's interesting about Creem was one of those types of magazines where the writers became they became kind of legends unto themselves. You know what I mean? Like Lester in particular. What I love about the film was that warts and all feel like the movie didn't, you know, try to paint this idyllic fairy tale version of the story of Creem. It was, here's the mistakes that we made, you know, not just, you know, editorially, but business wise. And I feel like I can really relate to that, just having been doing film threads since I was in high school, you know, and I feel like I can't stop doing it. There's like this part of me that's like, why do I just I've done other jobs, but this thing just, and so I so connected with that part of the movie where it's just like, this isn't just a magazine, it's a purpose. And I feel like you really captured that. Like it really captured that, like it was a lifestyle. It was a purpose. It was the truth that needed to be said. I'm so happy that you guys approached it that way.
I think it would have been a real disservice to the legacy of Creem if we did it any other way. You know, it was a magazine of its time too. So, and I thought that was an important thing to mention. You know, we talked about some of the, you know, wasn't the most politically correct magazine of its time by any means. And I felt like that was, if we didn't address that, that would have been like a huge mistake. And so we talked about those things, you know, head on, and we just, you know, we didn't try to cover anything up or gloss it over. We just said, you know, this is how it was, and let's talk about it. And so, yeah, I think it's a better story for it, better movie for it. And credit to JJ for allowing us to tell it, you know, as honestly as possible.
Yeah, I really love that aspect. The fact that you know, took it, I mean, not in a judgy way. It was just like a different time. But I think that's what made the magazine, right. The magazine gave no fucks. I let's be honest. And
Zero fucks given. Yes.
And I feel like we need more media that's like that. I mean, just to kind of balance, we're just living in this time of huge social change, and I think that we're going to get through that, and there'll be so many positive things that will come from that, but it doesn't mean that we need to destroy the legacy and, you know, our past. And so I just appreciated the magazine as a kid, just as someone who used to read like Mad Magazine and National Lampoon and Creem Magazine. I mean, I was a magazine junkie. I specifically had a newspaper route so that I could afford to buy magazines when I was like 12 years old. You know, Famous Monsters, Creem Magazine. I think, you know, like these were all the influences like at the time, and they were so hugely important. What's been the reaction to audiences that have seen the film and like what they think of the legacy of the magazine?
I think it's been incredibly positive. all of the screenings that we've done at film festivals, there's usually a big line at the end of the screening after the Q&A where people come up and want to share with us how the magazine influenced them growing up, and how they still have such an affinity for it. And I think that kind of speaks to something you mentioned earlier about what media is like today. There used to be this like community and this ecosystem between the bands, the writers, and the fans, and they each kind of held each other accountable in a way, and it made you feel like you were part of something. And when the industry and the dynamic shifted more to, clickbait driven, and you see a lot of stuff that's more homogenized and sterilized, it has an impact on the community. And I think it's had an impact on the music as well. So when people see this movie, it takes them back to a time when I feel like it was, definitely about the music, but it was, even more so about the community that the music created.
I'll say what you both are probably already thinking. Music today is shit. So let's be honest. Music today is hot garbage, and I don't care. So, but what I loved was it did foster that sense of community, and it was a time of just like amazing music being made. Like, so I don't know. There was, I didn't even realize there was like that kind of symbiotic relationship between the bands and those and the writers. I felt like you covered it so well in the film. Were there story threads that, like, I mean, the documentary is 90 minutes ish, but I feel like you could have done a documentary series. There's so many. Are there untold stories that you regret not being able to include?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of stories we just couldn't work into the sort of narrative thread, but yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we said this before that you could make 10 different docs about Creem and still leave stuff on the cutting room floor. So, but JJ's right. There really was a sense of community, and you can see that when for example, we talk about the letters section. If you read the letters section, the people that were writing the letters wrote like the writers in Creem. Like, they wanted to be a part of that, and they wanted to have the same sensibility, even when it came to writing a letter to Creem. So I think that's the thing. And I think that was what I think. If you're of a certain age, I think you've got a Creem story to tell.
Yeah. And not to mention, it wasn't just the fans writing, into Creem. It was a lot of times the artists that were writing in as well. So there was this really cool dynamic between them. And to Scott's point about, what didn't make it into the film, there are so many stories. We had to make a creative decision right out of the gate. Like, is this going to be an academic study of sort of each and every era of Creem, and, pull a bunch of threads on different artists and different writers? And that really is a whole other series of maybe mini docs or additional content. And what we really wanted to do was, for people that were there, it's going to be an incredible walk or ride down memory lane. And for the people that weren't, you're going to come out of this thing knowing what Creem was all about, and maybe it'll pique your curiosity to learn a little bit more about it. But one example of a story that didn't make it in, that it's actually pretty relevant right now and pretty timely, is when the Creem staff was living on a farm in Walled Lake, which was essentially a commune. They were under surveillance from the FBI because at that time, many of the Creem staff were associated with the White Panther Party. And as the story goes, one of the FBI agents approached my father trying to get him to become an FBI informant. And my dad politely told the FBI agent to go fuck himself, which is reflected in some of the reports that we were able to access in the Freedom of Information request. So that's an interesting story. That's a whole other film, though, in and of itself.
Well, I feel that a magazine like Creem, I don't know if it could exist now. I kind of feel like in its place we have the sort of feedback loop of the internet, which I just feel is not quite as thoughtful, right? Like, I feel that the conversation threads and the topics and the way that they were approached, it was approached for sure with a sense of humor, but also with a sense of thoughtfulness. And I kind of feel like that's what's lacking in this sort of fan feedback loop that we see online. We're just sort of living in the age of trolls, I guess. But I don't know that. I wonder what your thoughts are. Could a magazine like Creem really could it make it today? You know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things you have to remember too is that back then in the 70s, you know, there really weren't that many sources to get your information. So these the writers, the staff at Creem took it really seriously. It might not have seemed like it from some of the writing, but,
right.
but they always approached it from a place of first of passion for the music, and I think a responsibility to tell the truth and to let folks know what you know what's happening out there music wise and otherwise. And now there's so much information that's available. I just don't know if there's that same sense of maybe purpose that there was, you know, that in the 70s when you just, again, when there's so few sources, that's, you know, I mean, you had to wait every month in your mailbox to get the next, that was how you got your information. You know, it wasn't like now where you can just click, you know, 24 hours a day.
Well, it's and you know, I just think this has to do with also the death of physical media and just sort of instantaneously able to click and listen to anything, listen or see almost anything. Not that you shouldn't click and get on VOD or see however possible the Creem documentary. I feel like you should do that. But what I'm saying is that I remember when getting music was an adventure. It was going to a music store and having a conversation, and you'd find like the salesperson who worked at whatever music store, whether it was Sam's Jams or whatever in Detroit, that like, you know, that you would bond with and you could have that conversation. And I also think that you hit on the head, like the purpose. I think purpose is also, to me, it's how you have happiness in life. You need to have purpose. And I think that if your media outlet's purpose is simply to make money, that's not a purpose. And what about Creem and so much media at the time is that the purpose was built around a mission, and the mission is the thing that was so important. And I think that you captured it so well in the doc. So I don't know. I just want to thank you both, because I think the documentary is an achievement capturing this era that I'm happy will be preserved. And it's out. Well, at the time of this, at the time that this runs, it'll be out. But when does it come out? It's
Judy.
Yeah, it's August 7th. It will be released for virtual cinema. And then August 29th will be our TVOD release date. Fantastic. Well, you need to see this documentary about one of the all-time great magazines. Obviously, America's only rock and roll magazine. I want to thank you, Scott and JJ, for coming to talk to us on the Film Threat podcast. I also have to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. You go to storyblocks.com/filmthreat. If you are a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker in particular, stock footage and tools for indie filmmakers or filmmakers of all types. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's an amazing movie, and I just encourage everyone to check this out. Thanks again for being on the Film Threat podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.